How dare you try to take my daughter, Silas? I built this empire from the red dust of this city while you were busy squandering your inheritance on champagne and loose women. I slammed my palms onto the mahogany boardroom table, the vibration rattling the crystal water decanter. My ex-husband didn't even flinch. He sat there, smug in his tailored Italian suit, flanked by two shark-like lawyers who looked like they hadn't smiled since the 1990s. It's not about the money, Zuri, Silas said, his voice dripping with a fake oily concern that made my skin crawl. It's about stability. The board of Makena Tech is concerned. A single mother, constantly traveling, always in the headlines. The traditionalists in our investment group want to see a stable family unit at the helm. If you aren't married within 48 hours, I'm filing the morality and stability clause in our divorce settlement. I'll take the CEO chair and I'll take Amara. My heart stopped. Not the chair. He could have the glass towers. But Amara? My 5-year-old son, my moon, the only reason I breathed? Never. Welcome back to the Royal Griot. We are so honored to have you here with us today. To our wonderful community of story lovers, thank you for your incredible support and for keeping the spirit of storytelling alive. Before we dive into today's powerful journey of resilience and destiny, please drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you are watching from. We love seeing our global family grow. Now let us begin. The Nairobi rain began to fall in heavy, rhythmic sheets, turning the vibrant streets of Westlands into a blurred mosaic of neon lights and rushing umbrellas. I marched out of the headquarters of Makena Tech, my heels clicking like gunfire against the marble floor. My security detail scrambled to open the door of my charcoal black limousine, but I waved them away. I'm driving myself, I snapped. But Ms. Makena, the traffic on Uhuru Highway is. I need to think. I roared, my voice breaking. I climbed into my Range Rover, the leather interior smelling of expensive perfume and the lingering scent of Amara's strawberry crayons. As I pulled out of the parking lot, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. Silas was a snake, but he was a snake with a map. He knew that the conservative board members, men who still thought a woman's place was 2 steps behind her husband, were looking for any reason to oust me. 48 hours. I was a millionaire, a single mom who had survived betrayal and abandonment, yet I was being hunted by the very ghost of the man who had left me for dead when I was pregnant. I had built this fortune from nothing, turning a small coding shop into a continental empire, and now because I didn't have a ring on my finger, it could all vanish. The traffic was a nightmare. Nairobi at rush hour is a test of one's soul. I sat frozen in the gridlock, the windshield wipers swishing back and forth, mocking me. Unfit. Unstable. Alone. The words looped in my head. I looked out the side window. There, standing under the concrete overhang of a bridge, was a man I recognized. I saw him every morning on my way to the boardroom. The street vendors called him Mzee, though he didn't look old. He was a homeless man, his clothes tattered and stained by the city's soot, his hair a wild thicket of unkempt locks. But it was his eyes that always caught me. They weren't the eyes of a broken man, they were deep, calm, and filled with a strange, quiet authority. Usually, I would roll down my window and hand him a few thousand shillings. He would nod, never begging, always looking me straight in the eye as if he knew my secrets. Tonight, something shifted in my soul. A desperate, wild, insane idea took root. Silas wanted a husband? I would give him a husband. I would find the most invisible man in Nairobi and turn him into a king. I checked my rearview mirror, shoved the car into park right there in the middle of the lane, ignoring the sudden chorus of honking Matetas, and stepped out into the rain. Madam, you can't park here, a taxi driver yelled. I ignored him. I walked straight toward the man under the bridge. He was sitting on a flattened cardboard box, reading a tattered, water-stained book. He didn't look up as I approached, even though my silk dress was getting ruined and my $900 shoes were soaking in a puddle. You, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and cold. The man slowly raised his head. Up close, his face was a map of stories, scars, sun-darkened skin, and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from basalt. Ms. Makena, he said. His voice was a deep, resonant baritone that vibrated in my chest. He knew my name. You look like a woman who is carrying the weight of the Karura forest on her shoulders tonight. I have a proposal for you, I said, stepping closer, the smell of rain and damp earth surrounding us. I don't know your name and I don't know your story, but I need a husband. Now, for 48 hours, maybe longer. I will give you a mansion, a limousine, clothes from the finest tailors in the city, and more money than you can count in a lifetime. The man didn't blink. He didn't look excited. He didn't even look surprised. He just closed his book carefully and stood up. He was tall, much taller than he looked when he was sitting. He towered over me, a mysterious stranger in the heart of the city. "You want to buy a soul to save a kingdom," he said softly. "I want to save my daughter." I cried out, the tears finally mingling with the rain on my face. "They want to take her because I'm alone. Help me and I will change your life forever. Please marry me." The honking of the cars behind us grew deafening. A police officer was starting to make his way toward my car. The man looked at me for a long beat, his gaze searching mine. It felt like he was looking past my makeup, past my billionaire status, straight into the struggling woman beneath. "I will do it," he said. Relief flooded me so sharp it almost made me faint. "Thank you. Let's go." "Get in the car." "Wait," he said, reaching out a rough, calloused hand to stop me. "I said I would do it. But I don't want your money, Zuri Makena." I paused, confused. "Then what do you want?" "I can give you anything. A private jet, a house in Muthaiga, a new beginning." The man stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming. The air between us seemed to crackle. "In return for being your husband," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the thunder, "when this is over, you must spend 1 week living with me exactly as I live. No phones. No money. No guards. You must see the world through my eyes. That is my price." I gasped. The thought of leaving my mansion, my security, my life of luxury to live on the streets or in a slum was terrifying. But then I thought of Amara's smile. I thought of Silas's cold, calculating eyes. "Deal?" I whispered. "Now get in the car. We have a miracle to fake." As he climbed into the plush leather seat of my Range Rover, the interior suddenly felt smaller. This man, this abandoned soul, carried an aura of power that I couldn't explain. I didn't know then that I hadn't just found a pawn for my game. I had invited a storm into my house and my life would never be the same. The drive to my estate in Muthaiga was conducted in a silence so heavy it felt like a third passenger in the car. Beside me, the man, the mysterious stranger I had just effectively bought, sat perfectly still. He didn't fidget. He didn't marvel at the heated seats or the glowing dashboard of the Range Rover. He simply watched the rain-slicked streets of Nairobi roll by, his profile sharp against the window. I looked at him through the corner of my eye. My heart was still hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. What have I done? I was Zuri Makena, the Iron Lady of Kenyan tech. I was a billionaire who had outmaneuvered international cartels and built a fortune that was the envy of the continent. And yet, here I was, bringing a man who slept under a bridge into the sanctuary where my daughter slept. "I don't even know your name," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the engine. "Names are just labels people use to put you in a box, Zuri," he replied, not looking away from the window. "On the street, I am whoever people need me to be. A ghost. A nuisance. A reminder of what they fear becoming." "I need you to be a husband," I said sharply. "And husbands have names. Tomorrow you will be introduced to the most powerful board of directors in East Africa. You will be introduced to my ex-husband, a man who smells weakness like a hyena smells blood. You need a name, a history, and a soul that doesn't look like it was dragged through the mud of River Road." He finally turned to look at me. The glow from the dashboard illuminated his eyes. They were a deep, molten amber. "Call me Elias," he said. It was the name my mother gave me before the world decided I didn't matter. "Elias," I repeated, testing the weight of it. It sounded strong. It sounded like it belonged in a mansion, not a gutter. "Fine, Elias. We have 3 hours before the sun comes up and the game begins. I have a team of stylists coming to the house. They are paid to be discreet, but they aren't miracle workers. Can you play the part?" Elias leaned back, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "You'd be surprised, Zuri, at the parts a man can play when his life depends on it. Or when a mother's love is the script." We pulled up to the massive iron gates of my home. The security guards, seeing my car, snapped to attention and swung the gates open. As we wound up the long hibiscus-lined driveway, the house came into view, a sprawling masterpiece of glass, local stone and mahogany, perched on the edge of a lush valley. It was a monument to my success, a fortress built to protect me from the world that had once betrayed me. I parked the car and took a deep breath. "Stay behind me. Don't speak to the staff unless you have to." We stepped out into the cool night air. Mrs. Enyango, my head housekeeper and the woman who was more of a mother to me than my own ever was waiting at the door. She took one look at Elias, his tattered coat, the smell of the street clinging to him, his wild hair, and her eyes nearly popped out of her head. "Zuri, my child," she whispered, her hand going to her chest. "What is this? Who is this man?" He is my fiancé Enyango, I said, my voice ironclad. And by tomorrow afternoon he will be my husband. Get the guest suite in the West Wing ready. Call the barber I use for the board members. Tell him if he breathes a word of this, he'll never work in this city again. And Enyango? Find him something to eat. Something real. Enyango looked at Elias, and for a moment, I saw the soft-hearted woman beneath the stern housekeeper. She saw the hunger in his frame, the weariness in his bones. She nodded slowly. Come, my son. Let us get you cleaned up. Elias looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I realized then that I was treating him like an object, a piece of furniture I had purchased for a display. A flash of guilt pierced my cold-hearted exterior. Please, I added softly. Go with her. For the next 4 hours, the house was a whirlwind of activity. I stayed in my study, nursing a glass of wine and staring at the legal documents Silas had served me. The morality clause. It was a relic of an old era, a weapon used to keep women in check. Silas knew I wouldn't marry just anyone. He thought he had me backed into a corner where I would have to beg him for mercy, perhaps even agree to a reconciliation that would give him total control of the Makena tech empire. He underestimated how far a mother would go to keep her child. A knock came at the door. I expected Enyango. Instead, a man walked in that made me drop my glass. The wine spilled across the Persian rug, but I didn't care. The man standing before me was unrecognizable. The wild hair was gone, cut into a sharp, clean fade that emphasized the regal structure of his face. The beard had been trimmed to a sophisticated stubble. He wore a navy blue silk robe I had bought for an ex-lover years ago, and even in a bathrobe, he carried himself with the poise of a tribal king. The transformation was a miracle. He didn't look like a struggling man from the streets. He looked like an African prince who had been traveling the world and had finally come home. Is this the man you wanted? Elias asked. His voice seemed even deeper now that the grime of the city was washed away. You look... I stammered, standing up. You look like the lie I need to tell. Is it a lie? He asked, walking toward the window and looking out at the lights of Nairobi. Or is it just a different version of the truth? You see a billionaire in the mirror, Zuri. I see a woman who is terrified of losing the only thing that makes her human. We are both wearing masks. Mine just happens to be cleaner than it was 4 hours ago. I don't have time for your street philosophy, Elias, I said, regaining my composure. We have to rehearse. Your backstory. How we met. Why we kept it a secret. We met in London 2 years ago. You're a private investor. You value your privacy. That's why no one has seen you. London is too easy, Elias said, turning to face me. Tell them we met in the north. In the desert. Tell them I saved you from a broken-down car near Marsabit. It's a story people will believe because it's a story they want to be true. A queen saved by a man of the earth. I stared at him. He was right. It was more poetic, more Makena. Suddenly the front door chimes echoed through the house. My heart leapt into my throat. It was 3 a.m. No one came to this house at 3 a.m. unless it was trouble. I hurried to the foyer, Elias following closely behind. I looked at the security monitor. My blood ran cold. It was Silas. He was standing there in the rain, his face twisted in a sneer, holding a bouquet of black roses. He knew I'd be awake. He wanted to twist the knife. Open the door, I told the security guard. Zuri, wait, Elias whispered, grabbing my arm. His grip was firm but not painful. Let me handle this. You don't know him. He'll see right through you. He sees a woman he thinks he owns, Elias said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. Let him see a man who owns the ground he's standing on. The massive mahogany doors swung open. Silas stepped in, shaking the rain off his coat. He didn't even look at the foyer. He looked straight at me. Zuri, darling. I thought I'd bring you these. To commemorate the end of your reign. The board meeting is at 10 a.m. I've already drafted the resignation papers for you. It'll be easier if you... Silas stopped mid-sentence. His eyes traveled past me, landing on Elias, who was leaning casually against the marble pillar of the staircase. Who the hell are you? Silas demanded, his face turning a mottled shade of red. Elias didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just looked at Silas with a look of profound boredom. I'm the reason you're about to lose everything you think you've won, Elias said. He walked forward, his stride long and confident. He stopped just inches from Silas, who was shorter than him by half a head. I'm Elias, Zuri's husband-to-be. And if I ever see you bringing death into this house again, He gestured to the black roses. I won't call your lawyers. I'll call the ancestors to deal with you. Silas laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Husband? Zuri, is this the best you could do? Some investor I've never heard of? Where did you find him, honey? A catalog? Elias stepped even closer, his voice a whisper that felt like a blade. I was an investor while you were still spending your father's pocket money, Silas. And unlike you, I don't need a board of directors to tell me I'm a man. Now it's late. My fiancée needs her rest. Get out of our house. Silas looked between us, his smugness replaced by a flicker of genuine doubt. He looked at me looking for a crack in the armor. I stepped up beside Elias and slid my hand into his. His skin was warm and to my surprise, I felt a surge of genuine strength from him. You heard him, Silas, I said. Get out. Silas slammed the roses onto the floor and turned on his heel, marching back into the rain. As soon as the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I tried to pull my hand away, but Elias held it for a second longer than necessary. He's not gone, Elias warned. A man like that, he doesn't give up. He's going to dig. He's going to look for the dirt on me. Then we have to make sure there is no dirt to find, I said. But Elias, how did you do that? You talk to him like you've been dealing with men like him your whole life. Elias looked at the door, a shadow crossing his face. In this city, Zuri, the only difference between the man in the boardroom and the man on the street is the suit. The greed is the same. The cruelty is the same. I just know how to speak the language of both. He turned to head back to the guest wing, but he stopped at the base of the stairs. He looked back at me, his gaze intense. Tomorrow is the wedding. After that, the board meeting. But remember our deal, Zuri. 1 week. My world. I remember, I whispered. Good. Because the miracle you're looking for has a price. And it's not paid in shillings. As he disappeared upstairs, I stood in the empty foyer, the scent of the crushed black roses filling the air. I had saved my daughter for tonight, but as I looked at the man I was about to marry, I realized I had no idea who I had invited into my life. And then I saw it. On the floor where Elias had been standing. A small, gold signet ring had fallen from his pocket. I picked it up. It bore the crest of a family that had been declared dead and abandoned 20 years ago, the richest family in the history of East Africa. My heart skipped a beat. Elias wasn't just a mysterious stranger. He was a ghost of a fortune long since vanished. The morning of the wedding arrived not with a sunrise, but with the sharp, clinical glare of a dozen ring lights. My bedroom had been transformed into a command center. Hairdressers, makeup artists, and assistants scurried about like ants, their hushed whispers amplified by my own anxiety. I sat in front of the vanity, staring at my reflection. I looked like a billionaire. My skin was polished to a mahogany glow, my hair swept up into an intricate crown of braids woven with real gold thread. The dress, a custom-made white lace gown that hugged my curves and flared at the bottom, cost more than most people in Nairobi made in a decade. But inside I felt like a hollow shell. I was a single mom about to marry a man I had plucked from the gutter, all to win a game against a man I had once loved. Mama? I turned to see Amara standing in the doorway. She looked like a little angel in her miniature version of my dress, her curls topped with a floral tiara. She was only 5, but her eyes held a wisdom that sometimes frightened me. You look beautiful, my son, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I reached out and she climbed into my lap, careful not to wrinkle the silk. Is the new man going to stay? She asked softly, playing with the gold thread in my hair. Mrs. Enyengo says he's a king who lost his way. Is he going to be my daddy? The question felt like a physical blow. I had been so focused on the boardroom, on the fortune, and on Silas's cruelty that I hadn't fully considered what this would do to her. I was bringing a stranger into her world. He's a friend, Amara, I whispered, kissing her forehead. He's here to help us. He's a miracle we found in the rain. He smells like the earth, Amara said, leaning her head against my chest. I like him. He told me a story about a lion who forgot he was the ruler of the plains because he was too busy looking at the dust. He said everyone forgets who they are sometimes. My heart skipped a beat. Elias had already spoken to her? When did he tell you this? I asked. This morning. He was in the garden. He was talking to the birds, Mama. And they were listening. Before I could process that, Enyengo burst into the room. It's time, Zuri. The registrar is here. And Silas. Silas has arrived with half the city's press corps at the gates. He's trying to turn this into a circus. Let him, I said, standing up and smoothing my dress. A circus needs a ringmaster, and today that's not him. The ceremony was held in the glass atrium of the mansion, overlooking the lush valley. It was small, private, and legally binding. I had my lawyers vet every word of the contract Elias and I had signed, a prenuptial agreement that protected my empire and ensured he would receive his payment after our week was over. When Elias stepped into the atrium, the room went silent. Even the jaded registrar gasped. He was dressed in a charcoal gray tuxedo that looked like it had been molded to his frame. He didn't look like a homeless man, he looked like a titan. He walked with a slow, deliberate grace that commanded the space. As he took his place beside me, he didn't look at the cameras or the lawyers. He looked only at me. "You're trembling," he whispered, his hand finding mine. His touch was warm and steady, a stark contrast to my icy fingers. I'm focused," I lied. "No," he said, his voice a low vibration that only I could hear. "You're afraid that the lie is more real than the truth. Trust the destiny we've set in motion today, Zuri." The ceremony was a blur. The exchange of vows felt like a theatrical performance, yet when the registrar told him he could kiss the bride, Elias didn't go for a polite peck on the cheek. He took my face in his hands, his thumbs grazing my cheekbones, and kissed me with a depth that made the world around us vanish. It wasn't the kiss of a stranger. It was the kiss of a man who had been waiting for this moment for a lifetime. When we pulled apart, my head was spinning. The Iron Lady had been momentarily melted. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Makena and George," the registrar announced. The name and George. That was the name on the signet ring I had found. Elias and George. The name of the family that had vanished 20 years ago after a tragic accident that had left their fortune up for grabs. My mind raced. Was it possible? Was the man I had rescued actually the heir to the greatest dynasty in Kenyan history? We didn't have time for questions. We had a boardroom to conquer. The limousine ride to Makena Tech was tense. Elias sat across from me, his legs crossed, looking perfectly at home in the luxury vehicle. Amara was at home with Enyango, safely tucked away from the battle. "The ring," I said, pulling the gold signet ring from my clutch bag and holding it out to him. "I found this last night." "Were you Elias?" "Really?" He didn't reach for the ring. He just looked at it, a flicker of pain crossing his features before his mask of indifference returned. "I told you. I'm a man who lives under a bridge. Don't lie to me. This is the crest of the George family. They owned half of Nairobi before the coup in the 90s. They were abandoned by their allies, their houses burned, their names erased. People say the only heir died in a fire." Elias looked out the window as we pulled up to the glass towers of my empire. "Fire doesn't always kill, Zuri. Sometimes, it just burns away the things that don't matter. It leaves behind only the bone. And the bone remembers." "Are you him?" I pressed, my heart hammering. "Are you the lost heir?" "Today," he said, turning back to me as the chauffeur opened the door, "I am your husband. That is the only identity that matters for the next hour. Let's go show that snake what a real king looks like." The lobby of Makena Tech was swarming with reporters. Silas had done his work well. He wanted the world to see me fail. He wanted to document the moment the unstable single mom was stripped of her power. We walked through the lobby, Elias's hand firm on the small of my back. The camera flashes were blinding, the shouted questions a deafening roar. "Ms. Makena, is it true you married a stranger to keep your seat? Who is this man, Zuri? Is the board going to vote you out today?" I kept my head high, my eyes fixed on the elevator. We rose to the 40th floor in silence. When the doors opened, the entire board of directors was waiting in the hallway, Silas at the front. He looked like he had been sucking on a lemon. "Zuri," he said, his voice tight. "You're late." "A queen arrives exactly when she intends to, Silas," I replied, stepping into the boardroom. The room was filled with the most powerful men and women in the city. They sat around the long glass table, their faces grim. These were the people who had helped me build this fortune, but they were also the people who would turn on me in a heartbeat if they thought I was a liability. "We are here to discuss the leadership of Makena Tech," the board chairman, a stern man named Mr. Odieno, began. "Silas has brought forth concerns regarding the stability of the current CEO's personal life, which directly impacts our stock price and our international partnerships." Silas stepped forward, a smug grin on his face. "According to the bylaws, the CEO must maintain a stable, traditional family unit to represent the values of this firm. Zuri is a single mom who has failed to provide that stability. I move that we..." "The bylaws state that the CEO must be married." Elias's voice cut through the room like a thunderclap. Everyone turned to him. He walked to the head of the table, not waiting for an invitation. He leaned over, his shadow falling across Silas, who suddenly looked very small. "My wife is the most stable, brilliant and resilient person in this room," Elias said, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "And as her husband and as a primary investor in the George Trust, which as of this morning has acquired a 40% stake in this company, I find your concerns to be not only insulting but financially illiterate." A gasp went around the room. I nearly choked. He had bought 40% of my company? With what money? Silas turned pale. "The George Trust? That's impossible. That trust has been dormant for 20 years. You're a fraud. You're a homeless man she found on the street." Elias pulled a document from his pocket and slid it across the table to Mr. Otieno. "Check the signatures. Check the bloodline. I am Elias George. And I don't like people who threaten my family." Mr. Otieno's hands shook as he read the papers. He looked up at Elias, his eyes wide with shock and a sudden, deep respect. It's him. The signatures match the archives. The trust is active." The room erupted into chaos. Silas looked like he was going to have a heart attack. He scrambled toward the table trying to grab the papers, but the security guards I had hired, men who knew power when they saw it, stepped in his way. "This meeting is adjourned," Mr. Otieno announced, his voice trembling. "Zuri Makena remains CEO. And it seems we have a new chairman of the board." The board members scrambled to congratulate us, their previous coldness replaced by a desperate need to stay in our good graces. But I didn't hear them. I was staring at Elias. He had saved me. He had saved my empire. He had saved Amara's future. But he had done it by revealing a secret that would change the landscape of the entire country. As the room cleared, leaving only me, Elias, and a shattered Silas, I walked over to my husband. "You lied to me," I whispered. "You aren't just a man from the street. You're the most powerful man in this city." Elias looked at me and for the first time, I saw the struggling boy he had once been, hidden beneath the suit and the fortune. "I didn't lie, Zuri. I have lived on the street for 10 years. I chose to be a ghost because the world of the living was too cruel. But for you, and for that little girl who reminded me of what it's like to hope, I decided to come back from the dead." Silas let out a scream of rage and lunged at Elias, but Elias caught his wrist with a strength that was terrifying. He leaned in close to Silas's ear. "Go home, Silas. Your time is over. If you ever mention Amara's name again, I will make sure the only place you can find a seat is on the cardboard box I just left." Silas crumpled, his spirit finally broken. He stumbled out of the boardroom, a defeated man. I turned to Elias, tears of relief and confusion streaming down my face. "I don't know how to thank you. You gave me a second chance. You gave me a new beginning." "Don't thank me yet, Zuri," Elias said, his expression turning serious. He checked his watch. "The 48 hours of your world are over. Our deal starts now." "What?" "The week," he reminded me. "No phones. No money. No guards. No mansion. Just you and me. In the world you've spent your life trying to ignore." I looked out the window at the sprawling city of Nairobi, at the slums clinging to the edges of the skyscrapers, at the dust and the chaos. I was terrified. But I looked at Elias and I saw a man who had survived it all. "I'm ready," I said, though my voice wavered. "We'll see," he said. As we walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a message from an unknown number. I opened it quickly. "You think you've won, Zuri? The George family didn't die in an accident. They were hunted. And now that Elias has shown his face, the hunters are coming for both of you. Watch your back." I felt a cold chill wash over me. I looked at Elias, but he was already stepping into the elevator, his face set in stone. We were leaving the safety of my fortress, and the monsters of his past were finally waking up. "The Iron Lady is dead. Long live the woman who can survive the dust." Those were the last words Elias said to me before he forced me to leave my designer heels on the floor of the limousine and step out onto the cracked pavement of a side street in River Road. I felt the grit of the city between my toes, a sensation I hadn't felt in 15 years. My silk dress felt like a target, a shimmering beacon of wealth in a place where people fought for daily bread. "Elias, this is insane," I whispered, clutching my arms around myself. My phone, my lifeline, was sitting in the glove box of the car, which was now driving away toward the safety of my mansion. Anyone could recognize me. And that text message, "Someone is looking for you. Someone dangerous." In this part of the city, Zuri, people don't look at faces. They look at hands, Elias said, his voice calm and steady. He had already changed. Gone was the charcoal gray tuxedo. He was back in his tattered, faded coat, though he had kept the clean-shaven face and the sharp haircut. He looked like a fallen king returning to his ruins. They look to see if your hands are open for help or closed in a fist. Keep your hands open and you become invisible. Welcome back to the Royal Griot. We are so glad you are staying with us for this emotional journey. If this story is touching your heart, please drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. Your support means everything to us. Now let us continue with Chapter 4. Chapter 4. The first night was a descent into a world I had spent my entire career trying to forget. We didn't stay in a hotel. We didn't even stay in a proper room. Elias led me to a small, cramped space behind a car parts shop. It was a lodge in the loosest sense of the word, a corrugated metal shack with two thin mattresses on the floor and the smell of grease and charcoal hanging heavy in the air. "This is where you live?" I asked, my voice cracking. I looked at the rusted walls, the single flickering light bulb and the small charcoal Jiko in the corner. "I live where I am needed," Elias replied. He sat down on one of the mattresses, his back against the metal wall. "Sit, Zuri. The floor won't bite you. It's the same earth that's beneath your boardroom, just without the Italian marble." I sat, my knees knocking together. The transition from the height of the Makena tech empire to this was so violent it felt like physical trauma. My mind kept racing back to the text message. "The hunters are coming." "Who wants you dead, Elias?" I asked, looking at him in the dim light. "You said you chose to be a ghost." "What?" "A man with your fortune, with the George trust. You could have lived anywhere. You could have been a king." Elias looked at his hands, his fingers tracing the scars on his knuckles. 20 years ago, my father was the most powerful man in this country. He believed in unity, in building a Kenya where the wealth reached every corner. But power attracts vultures. His own partners, men he called brothers, decided they wanted it all. They didn't just want the money, they wanted the legacy erased. He paused, his eyes reflecting the flickering light bulb. "They set the house on fire while we were at dinner. My mother, my sisters, they didn't make it. I only survived because my father threw me from a second-story balcony into the pool. I watched the mansion burn from the bushes. I saw the men who did it. They wore suits just like the one I wore today. My heart broke for him. I had known betrayal. Silas had cheated on me and tried to steal my company, but this was a different kind of darkness. This was a betrayed soul that had been wandering in the wilderness for decades. I spent years struggling, moving from city to city, changing my name," Elias continued. "I realized that as long as I was Elias and George, I was a target. But as a homeless man, I was a ghost. I could watch them. I could see the greed that killed my family manifesting in men like Silas. I used the remnants of the trust to quietly buy back shares, to wait for the right moment to strike. But I never intended to come back. Not until I saw you." "Why me?" I whispered. "Because you were the first person in 10 years who looked at me and didn't see a nuisance," he said, looking up at me. "You were a cold-hearted billionaire on the outside, but when you gave me those shillings every morning, you did it with a look of such profound sadness that I knew we were the same. We were both survivors of a fire. Yours was just internal. For the first time in my adult life, I felt a wall inside me crumble. I wasn't the CEO of Makena Tech here. I wasn't the woman with the private jet and the fortune. I was just Zuri, a girl from the village who had fought her way to the top and lost her soul in the process. I lost my way, Elias," I admitted, the tears finally falling freely. "I became so obsessed with the empire that I forgot how to be soft-hearted. I forgot that the people on these streets are people. I saw them as statistics, as market segments. I used my daughter as a shield instead of a reason to be better." Elias moved from his mattress to mine. He didn't say anything, he just sat beside me and let me cry. There was no judgment in his silence, only a sense of forgiveness and healing. In that tiny rusted shack, surrounded by the noise of the city, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The next few days were a blur of lessons I never expected to learn. Elias made me work. We spent the mornings sorting through plastic bottles for recycling. We spent the afternoons helping a woman named Mama Sarah at her fruit stall in the market. I learned that Mama Sarah had lost her son to a hit and run and was raising 4 grandchildren on less than $5 a day. Yet, she was the first to offer me a piece of mango when she saw I was tired. I learned that the street vendors had a network of unity that put my board of directors to shame. If one person was sick, the others pitched in to cover their spot. There was no morality clause here, there was only survival and a shared destiny. "You see them now, don't you?" Elias asked on the 4th day as we sat on a curb eating grilled maize. "They aren't invisible. They are the heartbeat of this city." I see them, I said looking at the bustling crowd. And I feel ashamed that I never looked before. But the low rhythm of our quiet life was about to be shattered. On the fifth night as we were walking back to our shack, I noticed a black SUV with tinted windows idling at the end of the alley. It was out of place, too clean, too expensive for River Road. My instincts, sharpened by years of corporate warfare, screamed a warning. Elias, I whispered, grabbing his arm. The SUV. He saw it too. His posture immediately shifted. The peaceful man I had been living with disappeared, replaced by the warrior who had survived the streets. Run, he said, his voice low and urgent. What? Go to the shop. Hide behind the tires. Don't come out until I call you. I'm not leaving you. I cried. Zuri, this is what the text meant. The hunters. They've found the scent. If you're with me, you're dead. Go. He pushed me toward the shop just as the doors of the SUV flew open. 3 men in tactical gear stepped out. They weren't street thugs. They were professionals. They didn't say a word. They just drew suppressed pistols and began to move toward Elias with lethal precision. I scrambled behind a stack of old tractor tires, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it. I watched through a gap in the rubber as Elias stood his ground in the middle of the alley. So, the ghosts of the past finally have faces, Elias shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. One of the men stepped forward, removing his mask. It wasn't Silas. It was a man I recognized from my own boardroom, a junior partner named Caleb who had always been a silent observer. The Engeorge bloodline was supposed to be extinct. Elias, Caleb said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. You made a mistake coming back. You made an even bigger mistake involving Zuri Makena. The Iron Lady has a lot of assets we've been wanting to liquidate for a long time. You leave her out of this, Elias growled. Oh, she's already in it, Caleb sneered. Where is she, Elias? We know she's here. Give her to us and maybe we'll make your death quick. Otherwise we'll start with the girl. Amara, isn't it? Our team is at the mansion as we speak. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Amara. They were going after my baby. Elias let out a roar of pure, primal rage. He didn't wait for them to shoot. He lunged at Caleb, tackling him to the ground just as the other 2 men opened fire. The alley erupted in the sound of spitting bullets and breaking glass. I watched in horror as Elias fought with a desperation I had never seen. He was a man with nothing to lose, fighting for the woman he had grown to love and the child he had promised to protect. He managed to disarm one man, using him as a shield against the other, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. Zuri, run. Elias screamed, his arm bleeding from a graze. Call the police. Get to the mansion. I looked at the exit of the alley. I could run. I could find help. But as I looked at Elias, pinned down and bleeding, I realized I couldn't be the woman who abandoned people anymore. I wasn't that cold-hearted billionaire. I looked around the dark shop. My eyes landed on a heavy iron crowbar leaning against the wall. I felt a surge of a different kind of power, not the power of money but the power of a mother and a wife. I gripped the cold iron, my knuckles white. I'm coming, Elias, I whispered. But as I stepped out from behind the tires, a heavy hand slammed onto my shoulder, and a cold barrel of a gun pressed against my temple. Going somewhere, Mrs. Engeorge? A voice hissed in my ear. I froze. The world seemed to stop. Elias looked up, his eyes widening in terror as he saw me captured. Let her go. Elias screamed, but Caleb was already standing back up, a cruel smile on his face as he wiped blood from his lip. Now we have the set, Caleb said. The Lost King and his queen. It's time for the final act. He gestured to his men, and they began to drag us toward the SUV. As the black door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness, I realized that my second chance was slipping away. We were being taken, and the only person who knew where we were was a man who wanted us dead. But as the car sped away from the alley, I felt something in my pocket. It was the signet ring Elias had given me for safekeeping. I gripped it tight, the sharp edges digging into my palm. We are not finished yet, I thought. Poetic justice is coming and it won't be silent. The SUV pulled through the gates of my Muthega estate. The hibiscus flowers I loved so much looked like blood under the harsh security lights. The house was dark, save for the lights in the main study. As they dragged us out of the car, I saw Silas standing on the front porch, a glass of my most expensive whiskey in his hand. Welcome home, Zuri, Silas said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. It's a shame it has to end this way. But you were always too stubborn for your own good. If you had just let me have the company, we wouldn't be here. You sold your soul to a snake, Silas. I spat as they shoved us into the study. The room was filled with shadows. On my mahogany desk sat the legal documents, the death warrants for our lives and our legacies. Sign, Caleb commanded, shoving a gold pen toward me. And maybe I'll tell the men at the nursery to be gentle with the girl. I looked at Elias. He nodded slowly, a silent signal. I reached for the pen, my hand shaking. But as my fingers brushed the paper, the heavy mahogany doors of the study burst open. It wasn't my security team. It wasn't the police. It was Mama Sarah from the market. It was the mzee vendors from the bridge. It was a sea of the invisible people of Nairobi, men and women in tattered clothes, armed not with guns, but with the sheer power of their presence. And at the front, holding Amara's hand, was Mrs. Enyango. "What is this?" Caleb shouted, his gun flying up to point at the crowd. "Get these animals out of here." "The only animals here are you," Enyango said, her voice like a rolling wave of thunder. "You forgot, Silas. You forgot that this house is built on the land of our ancestors. And you forgot that Zuri Makena didn't just build an empire, she built a family." Silas laughed, though it sounded shrill. "You think a bunch of beggars can stop us? Caleb, kill them." But the men in tactical gear didn't move. They were looking past the crowd out into the driveway. The sound of sirens, hundreds of them, began to wail closer and closer. "The invisible people have eyes everywhere, Caleb," Elias said, standing tall as his handcuffs suddenly clicked open. He had used the sharp edge of the signet ring I had given him to pick the lock while we were in the car. "They saw your SUV. They saw you taking us. And they know how to navigate the city faster than any GPS. You're bluffing," Caleb screamed. Suddenly, the windows of the study shattered as police tactical teams swarmed in. But they didn't come because of a 911 call. They came because the ghosts of the city had blocked every exit of the neighborhood with their carts, their bodies, and their old trucks, trapping Caleb's reinforcements. In the chaos, Silas tried to bolt for the French doors, but Mama Sarah stepped in his way, her face a mask of righteous fury. She didn't hit him, she simply held up a small recording device. "We heard it all, Mr. Silas," she said. "The Iron Lady might have forgotten us for a while, but the streets never forget a mother who feeds them." The police tackled Caleb and Silas to the floor. As the handcuffs were slapped onto Silas's wrists, he looked at me, his face twisted in a mask of pure terror. "Zuri, please. I did it for us. For Amara." "Don't you dare say her name," I said, my voice cold and final. "You didn't do this for her. You did this for a chair and a paycheck. You wanted a fortune, Silas, but you ended up with a prison cell. That is your destiny." As they were dragged away, the silence that followed was heavy with the scent of rain and spent adrenaline. Elias walked over to me, his hands still red from the cuffs, and pulled me into a hug. I leaned into him, the billionaire and the homeless man, two broken pieces finally fitting together. "Is it over?" I whispered. "No," Elias said, pulling back to look into my eyes. "It's a new beginning." 1 month later. The boardroom of Makena Tech looked different. There were no longer just men in suits around the table. Mama Sarah sat in one of the leather chairs, representing the new community investment wing of the company. We had taken the Engeorge Trust and turned it into a foundation that built schools, clinics, and housing for the very people who had saved our lives. The Makena Tech empire wasn't just about software anymore, it was about the soul of the city. I sat at the head of the table, but I didn't feel like the Iron Lady. I felt like Zuri. Beside me sat Elias, the new chairman, his presence a constant source of strength and healing. We had finished our week in his world, but the truth was, we never really left it. We had integrated his world into ours. We spent our weekends at the market and our weekdays in the glass towers, bridging the gap between the struggling and the successful. "Mama, look." Amara ran into the boardroom, clutching a drawing she had made. It was a picture of our house, but instead of a fence, there were people holding hands all around it. "It's a circle of love, Mama," she said, beaming. Elias picked her up and kissed her cheek. "It's a circle of unity, Amara. And it's never going to break." As the sun began to set over Nairobi, casting a golden glow over the skyscrapers and the slums alike, I realized that my miracle hadn't been the money or the marriage. It had been the moment I stepped out of my car and into the rain to find a man who had nothing, only to realize he was the only one who could give me everything. Trust restored. Love wins. Justice served. I looked at Elias and he took my hand. No contracts. No lawyers. No lies. Just two souls who had survived the fire and come out as gold. "Are you ready for the next chapter, Mrs. Engeorge?" he asked with a wink. "As long as it's with you," I replied. The Iron Lady was gone. In her place was a woman who knew that the greatest fortune isn't found in a bank account, but in the heart of a person who sees you for who you truly are. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. This was a journey of resilience, but what do you think was the most powerful moment? Was it the confrontation in the boardroom or the loyalty of the street community? Comment below. We can't wait to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay blessed and keep the story alive.